Hello, it's the 14th of March. Welcome to my garden here in Essex in the southeast of the UK, and my name is Dan. So I sometimes get asked the question, just how much have you got in your garden, Dan? So I'm going to be making a video today, and we're going to be having, as close to as practically possible, a full tour of my garden here. So let's make a start. So over here you can see I have a bed here for growing. So this is a no-dig bed, and I regularly enrich it with my own homemade compost, and of course any other compost I can get hold of as well. Produced very well last year. I had plenty of cauliflowers in here, and you can see here I've got some perpetual spinach, leaf beet here carried over from last year. So a lot of what I'm going to be speaking of today, I've actually made detailed videos of in the past, so you'll find many videos linked in the description box below if you'd like to check those out. And of course, plenty of comments, questions if you've got them. I'd like to get some good discussion going on in the comment section below. So anything you want to say, put it in there. Anything you've got, how it relates to my garden, or indeed anything completely different to what I'm doing here. Maybe you've got an idea, something of which you think I could improve on. So we'll, put that in the comment section if you can. So I've got a grapevine at the back there, and I've also got some blueberries over there. So let's take a closer look. So grapevine variety Rhea. Now they actually make a lovely large grape. Sometimes people say grapes grown in the UK aren't very big. Not always the case. And I saw this variety Rhea growing in a customer's garden about 4 or 5 years ago now. Lovely size and a lovely taste. Last year I didn't get a very good crop at all. They all got some sort of fungal disease, but hopefully this year that won't happen. Now here I actually have got an apple tree. So I grafted this myself a few years ago. I got the scion from the Stephen Hayes YouTube channel. Years ago I used to do quite a bit of grafting. I've got a whole playlist on the subject as well. Grafting is a good way to propagate, because quite often if you grow fruit trees etc. from seeds, they don't grow true to type due to genetic diversity. So quite often people think, oh well, I've got this lovely Gala apple here, or this Granny Smith for example, and I wish to propagate it. I'll plant the seed and I'll get that crop. Well, that doesn't happen generally because of genetic diversity etc. So a good way of doing that is you splice, if you want to call it that, a scion onto a root stock, put some grafting tape on it, and you can get that variety. But check out those videos if that's something that further interests you. So blueberries over here, I've got an assortment of varieties of blueberries. Let's have a closer look. So here we are, I've got my blueberry plants, assortment of varieties. I've got Elliot, which is a late yielding variety. I have Duke, which is an early ripening variety. And I have Gold Traub, which is a mid to mid-early season ripening variety. So you can see that I've got 3 different varieties here, and they're ripening at different times. It's not always that strict. They can quite often overlap, but certainly in the case of the Elliot, they are a very late ripening variety, and that's very good, because what you can do is you can have blueberries to eat throughout the season. It's really good. I think last year I was actually eating blueberries probably from this area here for about 8 weeks every day, and they cropped very heavily as well. So they like a ericaceous, otherwise known as acidic growing medium, pH of about 4.5 to 5.5. I've never actually checked the pH here. I do have a pH meter here, but I don't think it's working. That was just a little thing I tried a few years ago, but never happened. So there we are. But I generally don't tend to dwell too much on details, because you can quite often, in my experience anyway, if you do that on certain things, you can sometimes end up sort of stifling yourself a little bit, which I don't really want to do. Of course, in certain things in life you really do have to dwell on the details, but for my purposes of growing blueberries here, I'm not. You can buy ericaceous growing mediums, you can get ericaceous granular feed, ericaceous liquid feeds. I do occasionally apply that. I didn't last year, had a lovely crop indeed. So yeah, blueberries, very good. They like full sun if possible, minimum of 6 hours a day, but a good 8 hours would be good for them. So yeah, pretty good, lovely blueberry bushes there, and let's hope we get a gooder crop as I got last year. So my polytunnel, many of you are very aware that I rate having a polytunnel or a greenhouse in your gardening project very highly indeed because of the lovely microclimate it can provide. Make sure you secure it properly. You really don't want it to blow away. Trust me on that. Many of you saw one of my polytunnels that the cover got destroyed by the wind, but you can check that video out if you wish. So quite often what I do on blowy days, nights, whatever, is around the door frame here and the door itself, I tie it with a rope or with a washing line string or whatever to stop it flapping about. I've also got the bench in front of it to stop it coming this way. That can be a very advantageous thing to do. So let's go in there, and there's some lovely sights to be seen in there with regards to some beautiful flowers. Let's have a look. So look at this. This is a peach tree, variety Peregrine. It's a traditional variety of peach to grow here in the UK, and really lovely indeed. Produced beautiful peaches last year, and looks like this year going to get plenty as well. So with regards to pollination, I've had no problems growing peach trees, nectarine trees in polytunnels. There's no bees at this time of year. Well, you get the odd one, but generally you don't get that many at this time of year around here, and it's not a problem. Sometimes to help with a little bit of pollination, you could sort of tickle your flowers or rock your tree like that to help move the pollen around a little bit. You could always do that. And the nectarine over there is equally beautiful. It's got a slightly paler flower than the peach, but just as beautiful indeed. And once again, if I get a crop like I got last year, absolutely fantastic. I've made plenty of videos on the growing of peaches and nectarines, so you can check those out if you wish. But I strongly recommend, if you've got a polytunnel or a greenhouse, you've got the space, etc., to grow yourself a peach or a nectarine, because very rewarding to grow, and they do have that sort of wow factor, you know. Quite often a lot of people still think you can't grow peaches or nectarines in the UK or similar climates. Some people actually think they're a tropical fruit, which they're not, and you can grow them very successfully provided you avoid peach leaf curl. The way I do that is by growing them under cover and protecting them from rainfall year round. So yeah, all good in those regards. And let's have a look at a few other things going on in here. So got some successful plantings here. Now what I've got here, this is broad bean variety Aquadulture Claudia, which I planted on the 3rd of February, and look at those though. So I'll be planting those out relatively soon. Germinated them inside, brought them out here probably 10 days or so after I planted them, and good strong sturdy plants by bringing them out here. And I've also got some peas here, variety Champion of England tall climbing pea, and I planted these on the 11th of February, brought them out here again about 10 or so days later, 2 weeks, something like that. And these need to go out relatively soon, so I shall be over the next few days planting those out. So behind my polytunnel here, I have what I like to refer to as the exotic fruit area, and here I grow some hardy exotic fruits. This is a grapevine here. This is variety Muscat Blanc. I highly recommend you grow that variety if you want a lovely purple grape. It's got seeds in it. It's kind of got that lovely old-fashioned grape taste. Really like it. Does very well. This was grown from a cutting by myself from a vine I had at a previous address. Had some nice crops, nice bunches of grapes off of this last year, and this year I'm expecting the same. And I've also got some persimmons here, otherwise known as Sharon fruit. I've got 2 of those. I've got one variety called Rojo Brilliante, which is here, and I've got a variety down there called Fuyu. So let's have a closer look. This here is Rojo Brilliante, you can see there, look, and it's a nice strong tree, budding out nicely. And here, don't know if it's coming out on the camera, is the Fuyu. So I'll put a video in the description box below where you could see what I suspect is a Fuyu persimmon growing in someone's garden. Perfectly possible to grow them here in this part of the UK anyway. This is USDA Zone 8B, and of course in similar climates as well. Once again, people get the wrong idea about persimmons. They think they are a tropical fruit. Once again, they are not. They grow in areas, you know, like the UK, no problem at all. And they're very nutritious as well, and very nice tasting. And once again, in fact, like grapes as well, but like I was explaining earlier, like peaches and nectarines, they do have that wow factor. You know, if you have visitors around, I'm not saying we should be growing to show off, but people are quite often surprised by, you know, when you tell them, yeah, grew this myself, grew these grapes in my garden, grew these peaches and nectar. Really? What? You can grow those in that country? Yeah, in this country? Yeah, you can. And it can sometimes add a little bit of interest, which is very important in gardening, to make sure you maintain your interest over time. So here I have a fig tree, which I suspect is variety brown turkey. Quite a long time ago now, probably about 10 years or so. I bought the original cutting from Wilko's, so that was some time ago. I think it was Wilko's, it could have been one of the other bargain places, but either way it's a good strong specimen here. Now I actually neglected it for quite a few years in a pot, but we won't go there too much. But I put it in the ground the earlier part of last year. I like to think that last year it established, and this year I'm now going to get a nice crop off of it, which will be grand. So of course this area here, it does require regular pruning and maintenance, because in particular the grapevines, it really could get out of hand here, which I really can't afford to happen, because that way of course I don't want them growing into the street, and I don't just I'd want to keep it tidy as possible. So yeah, if you've got a little area like this, that you don't know what to do with or something like that, gets plenty of sun here though. These are sun loving crops. You want to make sure they're getting plenty of sun. These are not crops really you'd want to stick in sort of a north facing area, although some of you may remember I have actually grown grapes on a north facing, well, not a north facing area, but an area that didn't get a lot of sun because of buildings in situ, and actually the grapes didn't turn out that bad after all. But in general, the general advice is if you're growing heat loving crops such as these, given an area of full sun and nice warm fences or walls that hold the heat can be a good thing to have there as well. So here, once again behind the polytunnel, you can see I've got my big tubs here of my own homemade compost. They're two big tubs. I turn one into the other regularly to make sure that keeping plenty of oxygen in there and just keep the compost working. I think of compost or composting area, compost bin, station, etc. as like the engine room of your garden. Always be making compost if you can, even if it's only a small bit, only if you just get a little bit of cardboard and a few kitchen scraps in a couple of smaller pots, keep turning it, try and make a little bit of compost, don't have to go into it, like these are in these big tubs. You can do it to whatever scale suits you, but very satisfying to make your own compost, and your garden really will thank you for it, because you want to always be returning the nutrients to the soil, to the growing mediums over time, and that way your soil should get stronger and stronger, and then of course better crops for you to eat. Isn't that wonderful? So over here, this part of my garden, I have my container grown fruit orchard, and I really like the idea of this because many people don't have big gardens. Many people are running out of space in their garden, and they think, how can I grow my own fruit? Or maybe you're renting, and of course if you're renting, the idea of living in a place for say 5, 6, 7, however long, 6 months, years, whatever, and you put your lovely apple tree or your lovely plum tree or pear tree in, and then you've got to move and leave it. That might not be that palatable idea. So if you're growing in containers like this, you can always move the tree. Now of course moving this tub here with the soil in this, it's not quite as easy, but you get the general idea. Something like this cherry tree here in this tub, that could be relatively easily moved. So that's the general idea really. So what have I got? Now here, just going to check the tags so I'll give you the right names in case I forget. Now what we've got here is cherry. This is variety Sunburst, and this is also a Sunburst. These cropped very well last year, and they're a really lovely tasting cherry indeed. And these came from Blackmore Nursery, if I remember correctly. I highly recommend Blackmore Nursery. They have got good quality products they send out to you, and many of my fruit trees have came from there. I've got a fig tree down here. Now this here is a Victoria plum, and Victoria plums, many people are aware of how beautiful, tasty that variety is. When you think of your English plum, you quite often think, don't you, of Victoria plum. Many people are well acquainted with them, and they're still grown commercially here in the UK, which is a nice thing as well. Now this here is a new variety I'm growing, and that is variety Winter Gem. Got a few little apples off of it last year. It's quite a young tree, so not expecting too much yet, but hopefully I can get a few apples off of that, and that'll be great. Now this here is actually a walnut tree growing in a container. Now in this small container, it's very unlikely to ever fruit, but the reason I've got this is because it's my grandfather, who's no longer with us sadly, years ago. Long story short, a tree was planted and the tree is no longer there. But what actually happened before that tree was taken down, this tree here was grown from a seed from that tree. So there we are. So it's like a little memory of my grandfather, where the who was responsible for the growing of the original tree. So it's really good because I've got a little piece of that no longer existing tree in my garden, which I really love. Can't plant it in the ground here. I can't let a walnut tree grow here, too big. Can't risk subsidence, etc. But there we are, beautiful. And this here, this is a Stella cherry that I was sent by one of the online or gardening magazines. I can't remember now exactly who it was, for using one of my videos on their website, so I really appreciated that. And once again here, I'm going to show you this because I've got quite a lot of sentimental value to this tree. So nearly a couple of years ago now, I lost one of my grandfathers, which is very sad. And but what I did was I took a cutting scion from one of his apple trees. It's an old, I suspect it was a Bramley apple tree, and it was there in his house when he moved in there in 1960. So, and it was a big tree then, apparently. It's a very old tree. And this is the scion here from the graft that I took there. So this is the scion, this bit here, where I grafted it with the grafting tape, and that's the new growth. So that's beautiful. Now here, this is another bit of growth that the rootstock has put up. So if I want, I can actually graft another variety onto here as well. So that's really good. Here we are. Now I have a tea plant here, fully hardy here in the UK. Many people are still unaware that you can actually grow tea no problem here in the UK. If I remember correctly, there's actually tea plantations in Scotland, which is actually generally colder than around here. Fully hardy here. They do like a growing medium on the acidic side, the ericaceous side. I've never actually checked the pH of the growing medium in here, but it's done very well. They like plenty of water, plenty of rain, so make sure if you're growing one, you don't let it dry out. So for example, you know, during the summer when you can get periods of little or no rain, just make sure that growing medium stays moist. But I've made tea from it before, and this should go from strength to strength. A little problem that you can get is the leaves tend to take a bit of a hiding during the colder months when you get frost, etc. But they seem to bounce back, no problem. But yeah, tea. You want to grow your own tea? Get your own tea plant. Beautiful. And here, this is a hydrangea cutting I took a few years ago, or a year or so ago, can't exactly remember, probably a few years ago. That's in there, and that's just waiting a little bit of a area to reveal itself for planting out. This is a fig tree, fig bush, fig shrub, whatever you want to call it. And it's a variety called Madeleine des Deux Saisons. Sounds French to me, don't know if it is or not, but it's said that it can actually produce 2 crops in 1 year, even in a climate like the UK. So quite often figs can actually produce, if they're in the right climate anyway, 2 crops in 1 year. Braber figs, which are the first one, and main crop figs, which are the second crop. I have seen a few fig trees, or a fig tree, whatever, produce a small second crop here in the UK in an ideal situation, south-facing wall or fence, etc., and in a very hot summer as well. I was looking after a lady's garden. I think she had variety brown turkey, and it did seem to produce a very small crop of main crop figs, but generally in the UK it doesn't happen that much. But I might be wrong, let me know if I am. But apparently this variety can. So I've really mulched this growing medium. You can see I've got it growing here in this dustbin. They make quite cheap plant pots. So this year, with some lovely care and affection, hopefully this will produce 2 crops, and that's great if it does. But it does produce 1 crop anyway, and the figs are a nice taste. So yeah, Madeleine des Deux Saisons. So I've got all sorts going on in the garden here, and I grow quite a lot of crops here. So I've got my no-dig beds here, the majority of which, well, a lot of anyway, is my own homemade compost. There's also some garden soil underneath, which I got from the front garden and put down here, and had some lovely crops from here. This year it's going to be really good. This growing medium will be turbocharged by now because I'm always adding to it. I added a load of lovely compost to it last year, homemade, the majority of that would have been, and here I was given a load more compost by another gardener, which is great, and once again I'm expecting this to be turbocharged as well. So you can see that I use this garden not just for you know, growing of flowers and crops. I use it for, you know, relaxation. It's nice to sort of sit on the bench sometimes and just take a bit of time to have a look and reflect. Quite often we don't do that enough in the garden because we're always, oh, I've got to do this, got to do that. But nice to take 5-10 minutes at least every now and then. You can see I've got my washing line there. Of course, got to hang my washing out, etc. Now, with regards to planting, I actually have planted some potatoes already, so let's delve into the varieties I'm growing. So got two varieties here. Now all my potatoes here, they're all planted by myself on the 29th of February. Went in quite early with the growing of potatoes. Now that's not necessarily a recommendation for you to do that, but I like to plant my potatoes quite early because I like to get nice early crops of potatoes. But you are taking a risk, particularly if you end up with cold weather, which can happen. Could still get snow, can still get hard frosts, etc, etc. But I'm confident I'll be able to get these through, because as soon as I see them come up through the growing medium, I will then top them up to make sure that the green shoots stay under. Don't want to get them zapped, damaged by frost. So varieties here, Rocket, which is a first early if I remember correctly here, and I've got Maris Piper here, which is a lovely main crop potato, and it makes delicious chips, I will say that. And I'll show you just how I planted them all. So they're all like that underneath with just a little bit of growing medium. Now with regards to first earlies, determinate potatoes, second earlies, determinate potatoes, you don't need to grow them like that and earth them up. You can just put them all in one go, earth them up right to the top, whatever, because they generally only grow on one layer as opposed to two, where main crop, otherwise known as indeterminate potatoes, grow. But I'm treating mine all the same just for simplicity reasons, and I also don't have that much compost yet. I'm still readying some, so got to be careful like that. But yeah, no problem there at all. Got more potatoes to look at, but whilst we're here, I'll just talk a little bit. Now here in these tubs I've got some strawberry plants, and they are variety Malling Centenary, which is a beautiful strawberry. I strongly recommend that you grow that. Quite often the criticism of modern day strawberries is they lack the flavour of older varieties, but Malling Centenary are beautiful, and if you buy your strawberries from supermarkets, etc., it's quite likely that you've had Malling Centenary before. Very important commercially, bred for good commercial properties, for example, such as very easy to pick, but they've still got a nice flavour as well. Malling Centenary, look that variety up. And another reason I grow them in these containers up here is because I don't want to have strawberry plants in the ground, because if I end up doing that, they end up taking up loads of space for all of the year for like a very short cropping period, which I don't really want to happen because I don't have that much space here. So whereas up here, they're just up there and I wouldn't really be doing much else with the space up there. So there they are. When you're growing in containers, quite often to feed, you can get something like, you know, something like an organic tomato feed would be good for those. So you can see here, I actually have some water containers here. Now I actually did make a dedicated video on the subject of harvesting rainwater for your garden. These are really good, quite important really to have some form of your own water in the garden. You don't have, you know, the chances of supplying all of it is not always possible, certainly if you're in a modest garden size such as this, or if you're in a very dry area. But it's nice to have some, particularly if you're growing something like blueberries, which do appreciate, and the tea plant of course, which do appreciate a nice ericaceous growing medium. And you know, lovely to cut the old bill down a little bit as well, isn't it? So over here, I'm just going to walk on my garden here. Shouldn't really do this. You know, walking on no dig beds generally is not as bad as walking on other sort of, you know, dug beds, but you don't want to be compacting your soil in many cases. then again, if you're growing brassicas, this is a good thing to do actually. You know, if you're going to set cabbages here, you know, like this is a good thing to do, because cabbages, brassicas, etc., Brussels sprouts, cabbage, kale, they do like a firm soil. So actually sometimes the advice of not walking on your garden is not always good advice, but that goes for everything. Different rules apply, different advice, etc. applies, but do your research, folks. That's what I do say. Now here I've got a lovely bit more of growing medium there, which I'll probably use on some of the potatoes, or I might plant something in that which can then, you know, something like cucumbers would be lovely in there, which could then grow up my water container here. You know, think outside the box. If you've got a smallish garden, of course, small, large, whatever, garden wise, it's all relevant relative to your own, but you get the idea. Think these here, sometimes I use these for shelving to put things on, you know, pots later in the year for germination, just make sure they don't blow over. And of course here we have another polytunnel, don't we? So let's go in there. So in here we have the lovely Dixie Red Peach Tree, and this year she's having a well-earned rest. She's cropped prolifically the last, oh crikey, must be 5 years or so. Massive crops. Many of you have seen just how many crops, peaches, this tree produces. Beautiful. But this year she hasn't set that many flower buds, which is absolutely fine, because, you know, she can't keep producing massive crops like that every year, because it just wouldn't have been possible. So there's a few, I'm going to get a few, but not that many, but that is fine. And you've seen the flowers on my peach and nectarine tree and the other polytunnel, so it's not really a big deal. That's what's good about having, maybe if you've got room, more than one of each tree, because that way if one doesn't produce one year, you still get a crop. And you can even, if you want, set them up. So let's say, for example, some trees, apples for example, are what's called biennial. They produce every other year. So what you may want to make sure you do, what you can do is offset them. Try and do that maybe by removing blossom one year from one tree and allowing the other one to produce, and then the next year do the same but in the reverse order, and that way you can offset, and you can get, even with a biennial variety, you can then make sure that you're still getting a crop each year if you've got two trees of the same variety, if you really like that variety. So that's very much worthwhile. Down here I've got some blueberries in containers, once again looking like there's going to be plenty of flowers down here, assortment of varieties. Elliot once again, Duke and Gold Trail, I think, or maybe not. And I've also got some blue crop, I think that's what they are down there. So yeah, absolutely lovely in here. And there's going to be a secret little project coming up, something I'm going to be planting here to look forward to, but I won't reveal that now, but that's going to be good fun. So plenty to come. So in the garden here, this is one of my orchard areas, and I've got some lovely crops growing here. Allotment seedless grapevine, I've spoke a lot about that variety in the past. If you want a good reliable grape for growing in a climate such as here in the UK, Allotment seedless is a great variety, beautiful tasting, grows really easily, massively prolific vines, fully hardy, tasty, people love them, great. Allotment seedless, grow it if you can. And I've got one here, it grows all the way down there, down the fence, so brilliant. Here I have a Concord pear, beautiful, partially self-fertile if I remember correctly, so I only need to have one tree, really beautiful. I've got here pear variety Onward. This is a plum tree variety Jubilee, which is soon to burst its buds. You can sometimes get problems with something such as plum trees, of course, or indeed any tree, when they burst their buds and the flowers come out. If you get a frost, it can destroy the crop before it's had any chance to set. This is one good thing about growing peaches in a polytunnel, is to a degree it will protect it from a frost. And with something such as peaches or nectarines, which produce earlier, or produce, burst their buds earlier in the season, it can be good for that extra bit of frost protection. So you can always bear these little microclimates in mind. So yeah, really lovely. But Jubilee plum, really tasty, good sized plums, about the size of a chicken's egg. And one of the parents of this variety is Victoria, so it's got some of that beautiful Victoria taste. Over here we have apple variety Worcester pearmain. It's a relatively early ripening apple. I think I have been eating them in sort of July time, and they're a nice tasting apple. They don't keep, but if you want a nice early apple, Worcester pearmain is a good variety to grow. They were once upon a time, I think, quite important commercially. Not so important now. I've never seen them in a supermarket or anything like that. But yeah, Worcester pearmain, a lovely, beautiful tasting apple to eat. And whilst we're here, actually, talk about commercial apples. Gala. Now, many of you are aware of the variety Gala. Quite often seen in supermarkets, markets, etc, etc. Got one here, bought this tree from Aldi's a few years ago. Beautiful taste. Some people criticise Gala and say it's got that supermarket taste, but I actually quite like them. These are really beautifully sweet, these ones. They taste really nice. So yeah, Gala. And you can see just how this little tree is occupying this little space here. And yeah, crops prolifically quite often, you know, the last few years. Beautiful. And yeah, really nice. So over here I've got like a little fruiting area. So you can see here the cherry tree. This is variety Stella. So Stella was the first self-fertile variety of cherry to be introduced to the UK from British Columbia in Canada, 1968. Lovely tree, crops very well indeed, and didn't get the best crop last year. Got some, I think it was the year before that, and then definitely the year before that. Got some lovely crops. So of course, once again, sometimes this will rest like many fruit trees do. One year good, next year not so good, sometimes nothing. But overall, Stella a great tree to grow if you want a lovely cherry tree. So I've got a variety of raspberry here called Golden Queen, and they're a nice small yellow raspberry. So as I stated, they are small, but they are very sweet indeed. And this started off with only a few canes, and now you can see what I've got. And I'm regularly pulling them up, you know, when they pop up in different, I can see one there already popping up from the garden. They also grow in the polytunnel as well. So raspberries can be a little bit on the invasive side. Some of you might consider it a good invasive. I do really, because it's a very heavy cropping plant, but you know, that can be a factor. So once you've got raspberries, if you want rid of them, it might not be that easy to achieve. So just bear that one in mind, or put them in part of the garden. You're not worried if you've got to, you know, plenty of gonna have plenty of raspberries popping up. So got to think of these things for the future, you know. So what else have I got here? I've got some red currants down here. No, I haven't. I've got black currants, two varieties, Baldwin and Ojibin. I put them in a few years ago. I've also got some gooseberries here as well. Down here, I have Invicta somewhere. I haven't looked after this as well as I could, and it's kind of gone a bit jumbly, but that's fine. We don't worry too much about that. And I've got Hinnon-Mackie green and Hinnon-Mackie red gooseberries here as well. So very good. Very heavy cropping this area. So I get the raspberries, I get the cherries, I get the black currants, and I also get the gooseberries in this relatively small area. So, and of course the bees love it as well. In fact, they love this whole garden really, because you know, the amount of flowers I get, whether on flowers that I grow deliberately or flowers that come on like a fruit tree or a cherry tree in the form of blossoms. So attracting bees is always a good thing. But yeah, a little area like this can be heavy cropping indeed. So here we are back in this part of the garden. So some interesting things going on here. So here I have pineapple guavas, otherwise known as feijoas. So I've actually got two varieties here. This one is called Triumph. Now this one is actually an unnamed variety, doesn't say what it is. Now pineapple guavas, fully hardy here in this part of the UK. People have produced crops of pineapple guavas in this area. Brett on the channel Lionheart84, he has grown pineapple guavas. Have a look at his channel. He's not far from here in Essex, so have a look on his channel and you'll see just how lovely these are. But yeah, I'm very much looking forward to how these turn out. They're very popular in New Zealand, and hopefully they will gain in popularity here as another form of like hardy exotic, if you want to call it that you can grow in your garden or your allotment or whatever your growing space. Something that's just a little bit different, but yet doesn't give you too much aggravation in terms of hardiness. So here I've got some carrots. Now I've got them growing in these tubs here. So these are tubs of compost and garden soil. The compost, much of which I've made. I've also put a little bit of bought multi-purpose compost. I think it was home-based brand on the top, just to set the seeds in. So growing in these, I have set a variety of carrot called Championship Stock, which can get a good size. So I'm deliberately going to be thinning these out this year. I want to get a good crop of carrots, full of great nutrition carrots and great fun to grow. And if I can grow some really big ones, that'll be great fun to do. So today we're on the 14th, so I probably planted these about the 9th or the 10th, something like that. Carrots, you can plant this early in the year, at least around here anyway, you can in a similar climate, but you can see that I have covered them in this, it's not really a fleece, it's more of a sort of mesh for protection, but I've put that over the top. It will also have an insulation value to keep it a little bit warmer. I can feel that the ground medium is quite warm even under that. These pots, of course, will also hold some heat as well. So these are actually containers which I think were once upon a time in someone's loft, and they make great plant pots, great plant containers. So yeah, here I've stuck a potato in. This is variety, what was it, Maris Piper, which I think I put in, yes I did, 12th of February, and this was a shop bought one, quite a big potato. So that's in there in a pot of my own homemade compost. Hopefully you can see that in there, and because it's a main crop indeterminate potato, I've put a bit more growing medium there that I can then tip on top when it comes up to stop the tubers being green. But yeah, quite interesting there. On the corner here I have a variety of pomegranate called Provence. I think it's an ancient, or Provence, Provence. I believe this is an ancient French variety, so it's fully hardy round here, gets through the winters here with very little problem. Sometimes you get a little bit of dieback, but that's not the end of the world. It does regenerate, and I have had it produce little pomegranates. Never managed to get one through to eating, but either way they make a nice little sort of like curiosity in the garden of a little baby pomegranate. Whether or not I ever get a crop of pomegranates remains to be seen. I'm suspecting that I won't, but I won't give up on it. I might consider putting it in the polytunnel because it's in this pot, etc. But yep, when you're growing crops that generally are not considered the norm in the area, your climate, you know, you sometimes have to take a little pinch of salt with regards to your efforts, if you know what I mean. Don't expect too much. Of course, if you're growing apples or something like that, then, you know, hopefully eventually you'll expect a crop and get one. But you know, something like pomegranates in a climate such as the UK, although this shrub, bush, whatever, is fully hardy, you may or may not ever get a crop. But if you want to have a go at it, the variety Provence, you could always look into that. So here underneath this net here, so the reason I'm growing under this net is to keep any potential like slugs, snails, rodents off, etc. Hopefully I don't have rodents out here, but it can always happen. So protection here. Now underneath I've got some perpetual spinach. All of these went in on the 6th of March. So what's that? 7-8 days ago, something like that. Earliest of all cabbage. I've got some Detroit beetroot set here, which is a lovely yellow beetroot. Once again, a bit of a curiosity. I've grown it before, and what do I have here? Oh, more spinach Detroit. So I've grown plenty of that, haven't I? And here I have got Gardener's Delight tomatoes. So plenty here, very nice indeed. And another little bit of sowing I'm going to show you down here. So I actually planted these earlier on today. Now they're in this polystyrene container, which I've got like this handy plastic top here for. It's just a bit of plastic that I managed to acquire somehow, probably from a gardening job I was on. So what have I planted here? So today planted Rotkugel 2, and that is some beetroot. Here I planted some, now this is interesting. They are called yard-long beans, otherwise known as sea-tail beans, pole beans, I think snake beans, long beans. Very unlikely to get a big size here in the UK, but very interesting, often grown in Southeast Asia. I've grown them before, not with massive success, but this year I'm trying again a little bit more. So there we are. Here, once again, bitter melons, otherwise known as bitter gourd. They are like a medicinal sort of crop, said to be very good for those who have type 2 diabetes. So look into those. And here, Pacific Giant pumpkins. Many of you have seen the pumpkins I've grown before. And more Pacific Giant. And I've Benning's green tint, patty pan squash, and down here, a squash called Blue Banana, which is a historical variety which I've grown before. So you can see the reason I've got this under here. It really does hold the warmth in, especially in combination with the polystyrene as well. I do have a lid for this polystyrene container as well, which you know, at night I can put the lid on as well, but I'm confident these would survive under here as long as they remain in the polystyrene container. You don't really want to be exposing seeds, certainly not the bitter gourd or the yard-long beans, to temperatures under about 10 degrees C. You really don't want to be doing that. They're good fun things to grow, a little bit on the different side, but we'll get more into the sort of exotic growing stuff that as the season progresses. But you know, for example, the bitter melons, I've actually made detailed videos on the growing of those, covering many of the points one may wish to consider. But yeah, you can see what I've got there. Going to keep these moist and expecting a good germination rate under here within about 2 to 3 weeks. So here I've got a variety of dahlia called Bora Bora. Really was impressed with that. Last year had some really good sized flower heads, brilliant. I've also set some other varieties of dahlia in different places in the garden, of which the variety name currently escapes me, but that's not the end of the world. I've written it down somewhere. Down there I've got some garlic growing, variety Morado, bought from, I think they either came from Lidl or Aldi, bought garlic cloves, so separated them out and planted them there, expecting some good crops there. I've got some gooseberries growing there, which I may once upon a time have set them, or maybe I didn't. Maybe something else set them, but either way they are there. So yeah, hopefully we'll be getting some nice gooseberries from there. With regards to many soft fruits and many crops in particular, make sure you cover them up. Cherries, make sure you net your trees so the birds can't get your crop. Very frustrating when that happens, and it's happened to me several times, and you just don't want it to happen. So down here I've got some more potatoes. So two, if I remember correctly, I planted in these 2 seed potatoes each, and this is variety Pentland Javelin. So there they are, 4 of these, so 8 seed potatoes. And is that a germ? Yep, one's lovely jubbly. One's actually started to come through already. So once again, like the rocket, I'll be topping these up. Don't have to top these up, you know, you can just put your compost, grow medium, whatever, up to the main level and then set straight in. Don't need to top them up, but I've done that, as I stated earlier on, just for simplicity, like a little bit of standardisation to keep things simple. So down here I've got some potatoes growing, and these are variety Condor. So I've got the idea of growing Condor potatoes from Tony at Simplified Gardening. That's a very good YouTube channel. And I first grew them 2 years ago, or 2 growing seasons ago, and last year I grew them again, but the first year I grew them I bought the seed potatoes from a company online. Last year I couldn't get any seed potatoes like that, but thankfully I'd actually saved some from what I'd grown the year before, so it's very good to get into seed saving, particularly if you know, there's something comes up that you can't get hold of anymore. Who knows about the future, what the future may hold, but it's never really been a bad idea to just at least know the basics about seed saving. So seed potatoes, these are from what I grew last year in this very garden, and I saved them. So all of these I planted here. These are all home saved. These too are home saved. Got to try and find somewhere to plant them. I might give them away to other gardeners around here. They can have a go at growing some of them. But yep, there they are. So I've only put 1 seed potato in each one. So 1, 2, 3, so there's 8. So 8 seed potatoes here. We'll be topping them up as they grow so they don't go green. But yeah, expecting some lovely jubbly crops from here. So here I've got some willow logs. Now, very interesting here. You can see here, look, that's starting to shoot there, little shoots. So this could actually turn into a willow tree in effect. You know, you could get it, put it in the ground like that a little bit, put some little bit of dirt around it, and then that could actually root, and you get your own sort of little willow trees. So there you go. Look at that one. It's just these little things that can be quite nifty and quite fascinating. If I remember correctly, willows quite often used in the making of cricket bats. All interesting stuff. So where am I going with my gardening from now? So many of you may be aware that I've been very much influenced by Joe Hollis over at the YouTube channel Mountain Gardens. He's sadly though no longer with us, so I was deeply saddened to hear of his passing, but his channel is still there, and so much useful information on there. It's just really lovely, and to see a man who dedicated his life to that degree, it makes you, you know, the man's dedication was very, it was immense, and he produced a beautiful project, North Carolina in the US, and the information there, you know, you could spend hours upon hours on that YouTube channel just listening to it. I certainly have, and I'm hoping to slowly pick up little bits that I could put into my own gardening. So I first heard from him actually from a friend of mine, who then told me about him being mentioned on the Peter Santinello YouTube channel, and that was my introduction to Joe Hollis. Time well spent actually looking at his channel. So what I'm going to be doing is growing quite a lot more herbs for medicinal use. That's the plan anyway. So it's very much in its infancy at the moment. I've set a few already, but things are underway, motions in those regards are happening, so I'm hoping to be able to feature quite a bit of that on this channel this year, and my knowledge should hopefully improve year upon year until I get more and more knowledge on that very useful subject. So for example, I'm actually a migraine sufferer. I haven't had one recently, I'm glad to say, but many times in my life I've ended up suffering from some quite bad migraines. I get the full thing, you know, the facial numbness, the vomiting, the horrendous headache, you know, feeling rough for days afterwards, visual disturbance, you get it. And apparently feverfew can be very good for it. I don't know whether it is or isn't, but I'm going to be looking more into that. So yeah, looking at sort of food, herbs, etc. medicinally is something I'm going to be going very much into. Particularly more relevant to me now as I am getting older. I'll be turning 40 in October, which of course is not old, but you know, we do need to start looking after ourselves a bit more generally as we get older, and of course we should really be looking after ourselves at whatever age we are, don't we? But yeah, looking into food as medicine, particularly reinforced by my sort of recent health problem that some of you are aware of. I'm not going to mention it now because it gets boring and it's in the past. There we are. So yeah, feeling quite inspired about how my gardening is going to be going. I've got a new job, as many of you are aware now, so I'm not you know, flat out physically working like I was, so hopefully it's going to leave me more energy for the garden, and it's great, particularly as the warmer weather is coming. So yeah, very inspired indeed. Let me know how your gardening is getting on. I really do, you know, enjoy hearing how you're all doing, and as always, I do appreciate your time. This video has been quite a long one. Let me know in the comments section if you managed to stick round to the end. I'd be very fascinated to hear how many of you have actually got the patience to put up with me for so long. Anyway, see you all soon, and thanks for your time.